right now we're going to continue our AFC West preview. We talked with Bill Williamson yesterday on the Las Vegas Raiders. Today we're going to break down all things Denver Broncos as we welcome in Jon Heath, covers the Denver Broncos for the Broncos Wire at USA Today Sports. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. We know the Broncos are really, really excited about the Drew Lock era. Let me ask you, do you think the Drew Lock era will start off with a bang this year?
Well, it's a tricky question. I think they can start off with a win in Week 1 against the Titans, but the offense overall and Drew Lock overall, I think they could honestly get off to a little bit of a slow start because I expect Lock to take a step forward this year, but they have a new offensive coordinator with Pat Shurmur. They didn't have OTAs. They didn't have minicamp, and they added some young, exciting guys to the offense, and those guys have a bright future. They seem to have a bright future, but to start out, they're going to have to get some time to get on the same page, and with no preseason, with limited offseason work, I think the offense could come out a little slow. But as the season gets on and they get their feet under them, I think they'll start to get better and better, and I think Locke will have a solid year. But I think he could start out a little slowly.
When you look at what the Broncos did this offseason, had a lot of moving parts when it comes to it. What's the biggest offseason acquisition in your mind for the Denver Broncos?
Well, they really needed a cornerback when they lost Chris Harris, and they traded for A.J. Boye, and so Boye will be huge for them. And then they also traded for Jurrell Casey, a defensive lineman from the Titans, and you only asked for one. But I think those are two very big moves for the defense because they lost Chris Harris and Derek Wolfe in free agency, and those guys were cornerstones of their defense, and they replaced them with two Pro Bowlers. So I think after losing those two guys, to bring in Boye and Casey, I think was huge for the defense.
When you look at the Broncos secondary, they got to go up against the Chiefs two different times this year. Is the secondary good enough, do you think, to even to keep them in the game against a team like the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, that will be very interesting to see because Boye is going to be the number 2, and Bryce Callahan, he was hurt last year, but he was a very good slot receiver in Chicago with Vic Fangio, and now Callahan is healthy again, so he'll be in the slot. But the other outside cornerback is kind of a question mark. They've got Devontae Harris and Devontae Bosby, and they drafted a rookie in the 3rd round, but they don't really have a proven outside cornerback across from Boye, so I don't know if they might bring in a veteran, or if they don't bring in a veteran, the other outside cornerback is probably going to be pretty inexperienced. Then someone with the Chiefs who has so many weapons, so many speedy weapons, that could be something that they could exploit. So I think the Broncos defense in the second year under Fangio, that they'll have a solid defense overall, but the secondary could have a weakness at cornerback, and that's definitely something the Chiefs could exploit.
We're talking with Jon Heath with our AFC West preview, previewing the Denver Broncos here on 580 Sports Talk. And let's get to some of the rest of the defense when you look at this. Justin Simmons did not get a long-term deal. How big of a situation is that, and do you think John Elway made the right decision?
I personally don't think he made the right decision because, as far as I understand, the difference was around $3 million a year from what they reportedly offered him and what would have made him one of the top highest paid safeties in the league. So to me, $3 million a year, it's not worth not getting a deal done for that small of a difference because after other safeties are paid this year and get extensions during the season, the price tag for Simmons next year is even going to be higher. So I think they should have pulled the trigger this offseason instead of waiting to next year. And now next year, Kareem Jackson's going to be getting older. They're going to be moving on from him at some point, and Simmons will be set to become an unrestricted free agent again. So they really put themselves in a tough situation. Not getting a deal done this year, I think it'll make him more expensive to re-sign next year, but I think they will try to re-sign him, and I don't think it'll necessarily be a distraction this year because Simmons is just focusing on playing well and getting paid next year. He's not worried about not getting paid right now. He just wants to stay healthy and play well.
Let's go with the linebackers or pass rushers in this situation. Bradley Chubb, back, healthy, ready to go. Will team up with Von Miller. Essentially, both of those guys need to be healthy for 16 straight games. Do they have anybody else who can actually rush the passer outside of those two guys? Because it was a struggle getting pressure on the quarterback when Chubb went down.
Yeah, they brought in Jeremiah Tachu off the street last year, and he did pretty decent filling in for Chubb, and I think he'll be Chubb's backup again this year. And I think actually Chubb is back now, but they've kind of been giving his knee some rest days, and Fangio even hinted that Chubb might be on somewhat of a snap count early in the season. So I think Tachu will get some more snaps, and then Malik Reed is a second-year guy who they got from Nevada as an undrafted free agent last year. And right now it looks like Reed and Atachu are the two backup rotational pass rushers, and they're not elite pass rushers. Like, they're not as good as Shaq Barrett was when he was in Denver, and especially now that he's in Tampa Bay doing so well. But they're good rotational guys, and I think they'll help them get a rush. And the thing is, too, those are the outside rushers, but now on the inside they also have a really good rusher in Casey. So I think having interior rusher to complement the outside guys will really help the defense.
We're talking with Jon Heath, covers the Denver Broncos for USA Today's Broncos Wire here on 580 Sports Talk. All right, on the offensive side, we know it's the Drew Lock era and everything like that, but they are putting a lot of eggs in the first two picks of their NFL draft this past season. I have no clue how Jerry Jeudy lasted at pick number 15. That is the second easiest pick that I think John Elway has ever been able to pick. I mean, he had Von Miller. That was a no-brainer. That worked out. Maybe this was the no-brainer. Anybody who was a GM was going to draft Jerry Jeudy. What has been said most about Jerry Jeudy this training camp? Because a lot of people really like his upside so far during training camp.
Yeah, he's been heaped. The praise has been heaped on him in training camp, especially from the defensive backs, and that's something the Broncos love to see. You love to see their experienced Pro Bowl defensive backs singing the praises of this rookie receiver, Kareem Jackson, who he's a safety now, but he was a cornerback with the Texans for a while, and he went up against DeAndre Hopkins in practice every day, and he said that Jeudy gets out of his breaks better than any other receiver he's seen. So to hear, and Jackson's an accomplished, he was a Pro Bowl alternate safety last year, so to hear someone like him say something like that about a rookie, it just seems like a good sign. And A.J. Boye, their cornerback, compared him to Amari Cooper. And guys always talk up the young, promising rookies, so that's common. But just the extent that they're talking him up and the extent that the coaching staff seems to really like him, it seems like a really good sign.
What about KJ Hamler, the speedy guy out of Penn State? And he had an up-and-down career at Penn State. His 40-time shows he can flat-out move. How are they going to use KJ Hamler? Is he simply kind of like a Will Fuller type from Houston where just run down the field? Or what do you think they're going to use KJ Hamler? And what is being said about KJ Hamler? Because if Jerry Jeudy is the truth, as they say, Cortland Sutton's a fantastic wide receiver. A lot of this might come down to, do they have a third option in KJ Hamler?
Yeah, in an ideal world, he would be their version of a Tyreek Hill kind of a guy. Obviously, there's nobody that's on Hill's level. He's not going to get to that level, but just they're kind of a version of a very fast burner receiver who will play in the slot a lot and can also get like end-around sweeps and that kind of things. And like you said, I think he'll end up being the third receiver with Sutton on one side and Jeudy on the other, and then Hamler playing in the slot. But right now he's got a little bit of a hamstring injury, and it may even, if nothing else, limit him in week one, but it may even put him in danger of not playing in week one. But once he gets back from that hamstring injury, he'll certainly be on his way to carving out a role as a third receiver.
We know that the Denver Broncos have had good luck with players from the state of Kansas. Chris Harris was awesome for the Denver Broncos. But I do have to ask about our guy, second-round pick last year, Dalton Reisner from Kansas State. It sure looks like he's become kind of a fan favorite for the Broncos. I expect a lot, and I know Broncos fans expect an increase, but he had a fantastic rookie year. I wonder what the fan reaction has been like to a local kid from Wiggins, Colorado.
Yeah, the fans love that. He's been such a good player. He's been such a good player on. He's also such a good guy off the field. He's such a high character guy, and he's a country guy, and people just seem to really draw to that. And he's a good leader on the team. All his teammates have good things to say about him. He's always coaching up and mentoring other teammates. So it seems like they really, really hit a home run with him last year in the draft. I think he'll be one of their top offensive linemen for a very long time.
Let's go with just some overall questions about the Denver Broncos. Who is this team's X factor? If they get production out of this guy, that elevates them maybe even a win or two. Who's the guy that you think could kind of swing a few games for the Denver Broncos?
Well, Noah Fant, their second-year tight end, he could be looking at having a very big breakout year because a lot of times tight ends can struggle to get their feet under them, adjusting from the college game to the pro game, especially when they're primary a receiving tight end in college like Fant, and they come to the NFL, they have to be involved in the run game and blocking and whatnot, and it's just a lot for them to handle adjusting to all that. So a lot of times you see a tight end take a leap in year two, and then also, like we've mentioned, they've got Judy on the outside, they've got Cortland Sutton on the outside, and they got Melvin Gordon. He's a very good receiving running back out of the backfield. And then if you have Fant carving up the middle of the field, he could have a very nice season, and he could be a nice red zone threat for them in the middle of the field with the receivers and running backs kind of playing on the sideline. So I think Fant could have a very nice breakout year for them.
We'll give you a quick over-under for you before we get your prediction on the season. If I set the line at 25 touchdowns for Drew Lock this year, would you take the over or the under?
I think I would go over just because they have so many weapons. That's tough. I would say very close to that. But because once they get down to the goal line, Melvin Gordon's a very good goal line running back, so he'll eat up a lot of goal line carries. But I think Lott can hit 25. So I would take over, but I would say it's close.
Yeah, because when you look at it last year, he did throw 7 touchdowns in limited action, but it's a lot different in year number 2 when there's film on him. So, final question I've got for you, and it's a simple one. Give me the Broncos record, and there's an extra playoff spot this coming season. Do the Broncos make the playoffs?
Yeah, I think my record prediction is 9-7 for them, and like you just mentioned, with that extra spot, I think that, or excuse me, I said 7-9, 9-7, and with that extra spot, I think that 9-7 would be enough to squeak in. It will just depend on how the other records break down, but if they can get to 9 wins, that may be a little optimistic, but if they get there, I think that would be enough to get in the playoffs.
I do think there could be a team from the AFC West that does make the playoffs, whether that is the Chargers or the Broncos, because I think you look at one wild card is either going to be Pittsburgh or it's going to be Baltimore. Another wild card might be somewhere in the AFC South. I don't know, maybe if it's the Patriots, but then you still got one more. I think a 9-7 to 8-8 team might make the playoffs in the AFC. John, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. Great info, great insight. Thank you, my friend, and enjoy the football starting next week. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.